Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. Um, my name is the Reverend Andy Bowerman, and I'm responsible for the work of the Mission to Seafarers across the Middle East and South Asia. I've got more years than I'd care to remember of involvement in existential counselling in a whole variety of sectors: foster care, working with professional footballers, loss and bereavement teams, and now in the maritime sector. At the Mission to Seafarers, we offer all sorts of support through our global teams, through our We Care projects, through our families projects, to try and support crews in some small way in how they and their families prepare, respond, recover, and restore, as we've just heard about from Kath. What I'd like to think about today for just 10 minutes is the reality of needing intercultural agility in order to respond to trauma appropriately. You'll be pleased or not to know, I'm just going to leave this one slide on, which contains at least the headlines of a few things that I want to talk about and a particular case study that I just want to focus on. I think gaining an understanding of your own and other people's cultural drivers, motivators, and frameworks is essential if we're to offer appropriate responses to trauma in the diverse maritime community. Now, these cultural drivers can be divided into three broad interrelated categories. They're there on the screen: innocence and guilt, honor and shame, power and fear. Now, I will summarize their characteristics in a few minutes, but first, short case study, and it will become apparent immediately why intercultural agility and some sort of awareness is essential for any intervention during a significant incident. Now, I could have picked a whole variety of instances here for us in the Mission to Seafarers in the Middle East. In the past 6 months alone, we've dealt with numerous deaths on board, 3 suicides, 2 terror attacks, and that's without beginning to talk about the crews who've been abandoned at anchorage for more than 12 months. The example I'm going to use is one which became fairly notorious around the world. The reason that intercultural agility is so important will become apparent as I describe the situation. It involves 25 Indian crew from across the different stratas of Indian society. At our point of intervention, there was also 1 Eastern European Marine superintendent, multiple Egyptian security officers and staff of the Suez Canal Authority, Japanese ship owners, and South Asian ship management team. You'll understand why we need to talk about cultural agility if we're going to respond to all of these different elements in an intervention that we're involved with. So here's just a summary of those different dominant worldviews. Innocence and guilt cultures, their education focuses on things like deductive reasoning, cause and effect, critical analysis, and the ability to formulate and engage with questioning and answers. Issues are often seen through the lens of a kind of predefined route. Written contracts are paramount. Communication, unless you're British, tends to be very direct and can be perceived as insensitive. In a society where innocence and guilt is a crucial driver, being right is extremely important. People are brought up in an education system that will therefore reason that rights or wrongs are established according to linear lines. Therefore, when it comes to responding to trauma, many with an innocence and guilt worldview assume that the response to trauma should also follow those same linear lines. It can make all sorts of wrong assumptions. Cause and effect thinking can do the same, because those with one particular cultural worldview may assume that those from another cultural worldview should experience an instance in the same way as they have been taught to respond. Innocence and guilt worldview societies predominantly have a very direct way of communicating. Opinions or worldviews are verbalized and expressed freely and often. In this recent situation with the Ever Given, this would be where many of those working for the P&I Club and the insurance companies would have developed their cultural thinking processes. Who was right? Who was wrong? What's the linear process we must go through to ensure that all the crew and all people involved are, yes, supported, but also that we discover what actually happened. People in honor-shame environment are taught life skills that focus on maintaining and enhancing their honor and the honor of their family, their tribe, or their nation. A core skill in this area is the ability to read the context and the people in that context in order to make honorable choices according to the situation that you find yourself in. People are taught who is who and how they relate to that group, not just today, but across all of history. People build a database of historic and relational data that will help him or her to know how to navigate their environment. Communication, interpersonal interaction, and business dealings are very relationship driven, with every interaction having an effect on the honor-shame status of the participants. In an honor-shame culture, the crucial objective is to avoid shame and to be viewed honorably by other people, especially the members of the group one belongs to. Because if a person brings shame upon the group, usually the group, not the authorities, will deliver the consequences. It won't surprise many of you listening that Egypt and much of the Middle East would have this as a foundational cultural driver. We go back to the story of the Ever Given, stuck in the center of a global media storm, where those from the West want to know who is innocent and who is guilty, but those on the ground are seeking to avoid shame and maintain honor. In the power and fear environments, people learn from an early age to detect and recognize the power structure and hierarchy in every setting. Nations such as India or others from the Far East nations would be classic for this cultural driver. They learn to align themselves with the right people, to enhance their own or the power base of the family group they are loyal to. It differs from honor-shame environments because power-fear environments are more focused on the hierarchical. Power-fear mechanisms are used in very positive ways to empower people in the environment by giving boundaries or assistance in making sound decisions. A ruler, supervisor, or family leader who empowers and is seen as benevolent will be a great asset to his or her people. Avoiding or managing fear is crucial in a power-fear worldview. Avoiding or managing fear is crucial in a power-fear worldview. A child will learn at an early age how to navigate life in a way that their choices of allegiance will result in the least amount of fear, or for our example, the least amount of trauma. In most cases, these choices will lead to a certain amount of fear that a person will accept as part of the package. But it means saying no to your supervisor because he or she is asking you to do something questionable might be seen by you as more dangerous than the actual thing he is asking you to do. So you might comply and do it anyway. So you can see that our perception of what is traumatic and our experience of what is traumatic needs to be overlaid with all of these cultural perspectives. Now, at the Mission to Seafarers, we attempt to mitigate this by ensuring that we have a multicultural team, each with an awareness of the three dominant worldviews, to engage with crews in any particular instant. In this particular case, an Indian crew who come from a power-fear dominant cultural base, who are being at the center of a world storm, it is being assumed that they are experiencing and responding to trauma in a certain way by those with an innocence-guilt dynamic, but those who are controlling the situation and adding to the stress and the pressure are seeking merely to maintain their honor and avoid shame. What is our approach? Well, very simply, and this really is a whole day seminar, our approach is to break down the incident, to describe it without any interpretation in the first instance. So on my first visit to the Ever Given, I sat and simply received, in as simple a terms as I could, a description of what had happened, without interpretation, without any response. It is only after listening and receiving all of that information that myself, then joined by our Indian chaplain in the south of India, began to try and help the crew to interpret what they had been through, before finally, after 2 or 3 visits, we started to assess how we might respond. Of course, for us as a team, we then have to translate all of that back into this complex cultural setting that we find ourselves in, with ship owners, ship management companies, those in authority, all holding very different perceptions. We try to do this in every time that we respond to a situation, because we recognize that within the maritime sector, there are so many overlaying cultural perspectives. There's 10 minutes on why intercultural agility in responding to trauma is essential. I'd love to share more over a longer period of time, but I think we are running behind time, and I've had my 10 minutes. I'll happily be around to answer questions and comments on that later in the seminar. Thank you very much.